IEBC tunaomba mtoto afanye surgery so that aweze kukaa kama watoto wengine.
Elimu ya sasa inafungua akili, inajenga fikra na inakuza uwezo. Na CBE, watoto wanajifunza kuelewa kwa kufanya. Hii ni elimu inayojenga uwezo na skills za kujenga kesho. Kenya haibadilishi tu jinsi tunavyosoma, inabadilisha jinsi tunavyokuwa. Jiunge nasi, tusonge mbele pamoja. CBE, elimu thabiti.
Shukisha mzee.
Hapa hakuna stage.
Wala shukisha ama mimi kapiga nduru na pesa yako msilibi.
Mimi sitaki kisirani. Shuka.
Thank you.
Shuka.
Poleni. Wacha nipigia mtu wangu wa insurance akuje washughulikie.
Mtasign hizi forms. In a few weeks time mtakuwa mmepata fidia yenu. Poleni sana.
Kwani kampuni ya IPM ilifungwa?
Unataka kusema hatutapata pesa?
Wewe na hizo unaangalia namna hiyo.
Policyholders Compensation Fund PCF ilibuniwa ili kufidia wadai wa kampuni ya bima ambayo imewekwa katika usimamizi wa kisheria au leseni yake imebatilishwa. Iwapo umejaza claim forms na insurance ikakubali kulipa lakini ikafungwa, tembelea tovuti ya www.pcf.go.ke kisha ufuate taratibu za kujaza claim na utasaidika kupata fidia. Policyholders Compensation Fund, dhamana ya bima yako.
Good evening, welcome to Prime Edition. I am Cynthia Nyamai. Now tonight, we talk about the competence-based conversation, and also Kenya and China sign 20 MOUs, and in business, we have more stories for you. And on the other side of studio, I will be telling you shortly what we have for you. But first, let's have the highlights. Kenya and China signed 20 MOUs as the two countries elevate bilateral ties to achieve what they term a shared future for the new era. Sharon and I. Former Migori Governor Okoth Obado reveals the details of his relationship with the woman he is now accused of killing.
So we're going to have maths now as a compulsory subject, but the math that will be undertaken by the students taking the pathway of social sciences and arts and sports will not be pure maths. So it will be a functional math, applied math. We'll come up with a name for it.
From CBC to CBE, competency-based curriculum to change into competency-based education, with mathematics becoming a compulsory subject. Kenya signed Pope Francis' condolence book at the Apostolic Nunciature in Nairobi. Welcome back. Our sign language interpreter is Lucy Maura. And remember, we would love to hear from you. You can send us your comments on KBC Channel 1. That is on Facebook and Twitter. And you could also send me your comments on Cynthia Nyamai on all the social media platforms. Now, mathematics will be administered as compulsory subject in senior secondary schools in the country starting next year. Education Cabinet Secretary Julius Ogamba has confirmed that following consensus among education stakeholders, the Ministry of Education has rescinded an earlier decision making the subject an elective for learners transitioning to senior secondary school. The CS spoke in Nairobi during the national conversation on the competency-based education.
The future of the country's education system took center stage on Thursday at Kenyatta International Convention Center as top education officials, members of parliament, teachers and other stakeholders gathered for a national conversation on competency-based education, CBE. Education Cabinet Secretary Julius Ogamba, who presided over the event, termed CBE a milestone in the country's journey towards a more inclusive, skill-based learning system.
Our decision to organize this national conversation offers us a further opportunity to get feedback on the education that is fit for our children.
When we talk about CBE, we are talking about all components of the education, including the curriculum, including the teachers, including the assessment, including the infrastructure.
In competency-based education, we teach from the heart, from the head, and with hands.
He revealed that the recently concluded county-based dialogues provided a critical feedback that faulted the making of mathematics an optional subject in senior secondary schools.
So we're going to have math now as a compulsory subject, but the math that will be undertaken by the students taking the pathway of social sciences and arts and sports will not be pure maths. So it will be a functional math, applied math. We'll come up with a name for it.
The minister has further confirmed that learners set to transit to grade 10 will select their choices of senior schools in a month's time.
And we have identified which schools can be able to offer what pathways already. And that is why we are saying in the next 1 month, selection process will begin. We have already been able to map all the schools around the country, all the 10,000 schools, all the 10,000 senior schools around the country. We have been able to know which school has what facilities, and we know which students can be able to go to which schools.
Speakers at the event urged for sustained engagement as the country moves towards a learner-centered curriculum that places skills and creativity at its core. Joseph Ohungu for Prime Edition.
Interior Cabinet Secretary Kipchumba Murkomen says those practicing extremist activities will be apprehended as they pose a danger to their congregants. CS Murkomen revealed that a cabinet committee is seized of the report of the task force chaired by Reverend Mutava Musimi, which recommended reforms to curb religious extremism.
Interior Cabinet Secretary Kipchumba Murkomen has taken the Jukwaa la Usalama to Lower Eastern. The CS stated that the full cabinet will consider and deal with proposals to tame religious fundamentalism.
Itajadiliwa na kupitishwa na cabinet, alafu ipelekwe katika bunge kwa sehemu ambazo marekebisho inahitajika.
He was reacting to the Migori incident where 2 congregants died and 57 were rescued from a church after they refused to be treated at a local hospital.
Lakini kuna church ambazo tunasema kwamba ni cults ama ni dini bandia ambayo wana itikadi ambayo haiambatani na katiba na haiambatani na sheria ya Kenya.
Murkomen acknowledged the important role religious institutions play, but faulted a few that take advantage of vulnerable faithful seeking divine intervention.
Tumedhibiti ile shida ili karibu itokee huko Rongo, karibu ifanane pia na yale ilifanyika huko Shakahola. We must hold our chiefs and assistant chiefs accountable in everything that happens in your locality. There should be no chief or assistant chief who will have an issue happening in his village and he doesn't know.
Meanwhile, the Interior Cabinet Secretary has ordered a major crackdown on illegally acquired state land. He also instructed that all public land should be properly titled and squatters invading the said land be evicted immediately. Isufar reporting for Prime Edition.
Former Migori County Governor Okoth Obado has denied assigning illegal duties to his two co-accused, a personal assistant, Michael Oyamo, and Kaspal Obiero, a clerk in Migori County. Defending himself for the second day in the Sharon Otieno murder case, Obado painted a picture of a relationship that began in a friendly manner, but later, due to inconsistencies, our court reporter Ruth Wamboi has the details for you on the case, which now has been pushed to run for 4 consecutive days beginning from 19th May 2025, with the second and third accused now set to defend themselves.
Thursday, during re-examination of Okoth Obado's defense, trial judge Cecilia Githua was informed that he ended his relationship with Sharon due to inconsistencies.
My decision to terminate the relationship was not about the pregnancy, but primarily it was as a result of the inconsistency.
Obado stated that despite ending the relationship, he continued to support Sharon emotionally and financially.
To buy land and build a house. That was just to settle her because of the child she was carrying for me.
The court was also informed that Sharon wanted to move out of her parents' house into a rental house in Homa Bay town, a transition he facilitated.
Even after terminating the relationship, I was still giving her money for her welfare. That means even for the welfare of the child that she was carrying for me. And that is the truth about the welfare.
When asked whether he assigned illegal duties to his co-accused Michael Oyamo and Kaspel Obiero,
they have their distinct line of reporting, and they are headed by the head of human resource. And even the duties they are assigned.
With Obado having closed his testimonies, the second accused, Michael Oyamo, will take to the witness stand on May 19, 2025, after Justice Cecilia Githua allowed his application to adjourn the case, citing the weight of testimonies by Obado.
For those particular reasons, I am prepared to review my decision and allow an adjournment to the date set in May.
Obado, a teacher by profession and former governor for Migori County, is implicated in the murder of former Rongo University student whose body was found dumped in a thicket in Kodera Forest in September 2018. At the close of his evidence in chief on Thursday, Okoth Obado explained to the court of his busy schedule while he was a county boss in Migori. However, he snapped to inform the court why his mobile phone was found near the crime scene proximity by the investigating officer after the incident. Ruth Wamboi reporting for Prime Edition from Milimani Law Court.
We continue to follow up that story for you. Now, the search for new commissioners to join the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission will conclude on Friday. 4 candidates faced interviewing panel on Thursday, each presenting their vision for credible and transparent elections in the country. Vincent Kimtai Kimsop, Yufnalis Ndege Okubo, Anne Waithera Gashoya, and Michael Olio Onyango shared how their qualifications qualifications make them suitable for the job. The interviews mark a crucial step towards reconstituting the commission ahead of the next electoral cycle. By the end of the exercise, over 100 candidates will have been vetted for the positions of the chairperson, deputy chair, and commissioners.
Part of the reason why there is usually suspicion in our electoral process is because political parties are kept in the dark. Most of the time, major policy decisions are not communicated to political parties, and then political parties start suspecting that actually there is something cooking behind the scenes. So number one would be engagement with political parties on a quarterly basis. Because I know from a person who has worked with political parties all my life, I know the pain that they are going through, and I will be in the commission to make sure that the relationship between IEBC and political parties works for the betterment of this beloved country, Kenya.
Orange Democratic Movement leader Raila Odinga and Speaker of the National Assembly Moses Wetangula are among the key figures who have offered their condolence following the death of Pope Francis. The leaders, alongside a section of members of the National Assembly, gathered at the Apostolic Nunciature in Nairobi to sign the condolence book and pay their respects to the late Pope. The leaders underscored the profound influence Pope Francis had, not only as a spiritual leader, but as a global symbol of peace, compassion, and justice.
Following the death of Pope Francis, leaders across the country have continued to offer their condolences. On Thursday morning at the Apostolic Nunciature in Nairobi, former Prime Minister Raila Odinga and National Assembly Speaker Moses Wetangula were among leaders who paid tribute to the late Pope.
To the first Pope from the global south, and he exemplified the spirit of hope, of reconciliation, and of compassion.
That he stood for building bridges between people and communities, and not barricading walls around people and communities.
They were received by the Apostolic Nuncio to Kenya, Archbishop Hubertus Matthews Maria Van Megen. Archbishop Van Megen highlighted the late pontiff's emphasis on mercy over merit. Separately, the Roman Catholic Diocese of Kericho Bishop Alfred Rotich has eulogized the late Pope Francis as a spiritual leader who championed for the care of the vulnerable in the society, including the sick.
He said, take care of the vulnerables, take care of the sick, and when you go back to your country, he bid us bye, and he wished us well.
The Bishop of the Roman Catholic Diocese of Kakamega, Joseph Obanyi, also eulogized the late Pope Francis.
Mtu wa kipekee kwangu binafsi, kwa sababu yeye ndiye aliyeniteua kuwa askofu wa jimbo la Kakamega.
The Pope's body is still lying in state at St. Peter's Basilica till 7 p.m. on Friday. His coffin will be sealed during a liturgical rite to be held at the same venue on Friday at 8 p.m. ahead of the papal funeral on Saturday morning at the Basilica of St. Mary Major. Martine Maslin for Prime Edition.
County governments are set to receive a total of 42 billion shillings following the passage of a bill that will unlock monies from donors in the form of loans and grants. The money drawn from the donor loans and grants will support crucial services across the devolved units.
The National Assembly has given a thumbs up to the county government's Additional Allocations Bill 2025, a move that will unlock funds from development partners allocated to counties in form of loans and grants in the 2024-2025 financial year to support county programs.
Honorable Speaker, this bill is going to allocate 42 billion money from donors in form of loans and grants that is going to help Kenya's run programs in health, in water, in sanitation, in agriculture, and these are things that are going to transform and help our people across the country.
The bill had faced headwinds last year, mainly due to disagreements on the roads maintenance levy fund. However, consensus has now been reached, allowing the legislation to move forward.
And I want to give you assurance and comfort that all is under control and that there is no unhelpful exposure for you as members of parliament in relation to the matters in contention. You are safe.
The import of this bill for now, as we stand, and the position that you have declared, that we have had a robust discussion and agreements, and that consent has been entered to withdraw the court case. When we come to this order, Honourable Speaker, I would implore you and implore members that we allow the mover to reply on this.
Senate already passed the bill. Meanwhile, investigations into the brutal murder of Gilbert Kinyua, a patient who was allegedly killed at the Kenyatta National Hospital, are still ongoing. National Assembly Internal Security Committee Vice Chair Dido Raso, while updating the House on the status of investigation, noted that the DCI is fast-tracking the probe.
Analysis results confirmed that the DNA profile generated from the blood stains in both the knife and floor swabs matched the DNA profile of the deceased. However, the fingernail clippings did not yield any foreign DNA profile, and the swabs from the crocs contained only lightly stained human blood. The investigations are ongoing, and when finalized, any persons found culpable will be arraigned before court.
But, Honourable Speaker, from the report you can see it's like they already know the culprit, the person who killed that person. Because they are talking about the knife, about the crocs, and they could see even the movement. So I would urge here, kindly, try and push the DCI and the investigators. They try and get hold of this person so that we can close that chapter.
MPs, however, expressed disappointment on the security status of health facilities.
A hospital like KNH, doesn't it have surveillance system or cameras? Because I wonder and still struggle to believe that somebody can just walk in a hospital and kill a patient and still walk out without being noticed.
I think even as you look at the security element, don't overlook the issue of conspiracy, Honourable Speaker, because I do believe there could be conspiracy between the workers in the hospital and some of these crooks who are attacking the patients. Otherwise, if you just focus purely on security, the security guards, you might miss that element, and then you find people continue suffering.
Even looking at the statement, and also with the DCI, we are almost of the opinion that there's no way somebody will come from outside to kill a patient if there are no insiders who know where the patient is, they are on which bed.
The late Kinyua was found dead at his bed in the hospital in February this year. Kamche Menza for Prime Edition.
The Association of Gaming Operators in the country, in partnership with government agencies, regulators, and civil society, are spearheading a set of proactive initiatives designed to shape the future of the gaming industry and protect innocent Kenyans from addiction to gaming. In a press release, the association says national-wide awareness campaigns promoting informed, mindful participation in gaming will be carried out across the country. Advocacy for tools such as timeout mechanisms, betting and deposit limits will be put in place to ensure a healthy and controlled gaming behavior among Kenyans. The regulatory measures comes amid calls to regulate the sector following increase in cases of mental health and some suicide cases attributed to betting. Well, on the other side of our studio, we have O'Brien, who will be speaking to our guests on the deepening Kenya-China ties. O'Brien?
Well, thank you very much indeed, Cynthia and Nyamai back there in Studio B. And of course, tonight we want to throw a critical focus on the trip to China by President William Ruto and his entourage. And of course, today we have seen a number of deals being signed. And of course, President William Ruto and Chinese President Xi Jinping holding bilaterals. And of course, we'll be breaking down the contents of that conversation. You're watching Prime Edition with me, O'Brien Kimani. And of course, I'll be unveiling my team of experts who will be guiding us through this conversation. But for now, we're taking a short break, and thereafter, we're coming back with more. Stay right here.
Town Express! 20, town! What's your town? Bado haijajaa dere watu wengine 7.
Kwani wazako si ungekulia kwenu? Sasa umetoka wapi? Mimi sitaki mahindi leo.
Wewe unanishia mkate.
Siagushi mkate fubi.
Wewe ongea bora usikuze mkate yangu.
Usishike hivi. Unataka kulia huko mbali na mimi. Si mimi nakulamiwa ni wewe.
Donda, gari imejaa na bado unasema watu waingie. Tuambie ndare hapo apunguze wimbo. Niongea na kama hapa.
Hakuna volume inapunguzwa hapa. Kama unataka kuendesha gari yako, enda dial *570#. Option ya 3. Watu wanaendesha magari hapa nje na wewe bado unapiga nyanyenye kwa matatu.
Option 3,
unalipa ama unasuka?
Comfort yako iko kwa *570#. Option 3, Master Genio moja safi, reliable, modern safety and security features. Cheza mara kadhaa ujaze entry tickets zako kwenye draw ili uimarishe uwezo wa kushinda. Mshindi tunamtangaza 27th of April na gari tutakufikishia.
Unaenda ama wewe? Mimi sindi na madri nishainuka na *570#.
Inuka na Genio kwa *570#. Option 3.
Asante.
Elimu ya sasa inafunza watoto wetu ujuzi wa maisha ya kila siku. Ni kusoma kwa kufanya. CBE inafuata vile kila mtoto anaelewa vyema. Halisi binafsi yenye nguvu. Watoto wanachunguza, wanauliza maswali, wanaunda vitu na wanaongoza. Hii ni elimu inayoleta mabadiliko. CBE, elimu dhabiti.
Welcome back. It's now time for business. Kenyan exports will now enjoy wider access to the Chinese market after Beijing assigned its relations with Nairobi a comprehensive strategic partnership of coordination for a new era status. Following the signing of the new partnership, Kenyan exports will face very few restrictions to China. President William Ruto, who is on a state visit to China, has hailed the new era of regulations with China, saying it will help bolster the relationship between the two countries. During the meeting, Kenya and China signed a total of 20 MOUs to enhance bilateral ties.
Kenya and China have enjoyed a strategic partnership for decades, allowing the two nations to collaborate on many fields like research, ICT, and human development, among others. But today, the two countries have elevated their partnership into a comprehensive strategic partnership of coordination for a new era. The new status gives the two countries a new platform to engage in more areas like technology, political and economic development. President William Ruto, who is on a state visit to China, has said the new deals will open doors for increased private sector investments. Discussions between the two leaders focused on key priorities such as trade expansion, investment promotion, and development cooperation, aligning the Belt and Road Initiative with Kenya's national development agenda. During the meeting, China-Kenya signed a new framework that will see Beijing fund construction of standard gauge railway to Naivasha, the Phase 2, and from Naivasha to Malaba, Phase 3, dueling of the Nairobi-Nakuru, Mau Summit-Malaba Highway, the Kiambu Northern Bypass, the Eldoret Bypass, and the construction of Nithi Bridge. Trade ties between China and Kenya have expanded exponentially, reaching an all-time high of 510 billion shillings in the year 2024 and is expected to breach the 600 billion shillings mark in 2025, according to Kenya Investment Authority. Michael Moniga for Prime Edition.
Micro, small and medium-sized enterprises are keen on strategies that would access to credit and market to drive their growth. These were views expressed during the public participation forums on the draft MSE policy of 2025 held in Nakuru, Mombasa, Kisumu and Chuka. As Alan Ooko narrates, MSE policy of 2025 seeks to harmonize support to small businesses by various agencies.
During the stakeholders engagement forum, small-scale traders in Mombasa decried challenges in securing loans, markets and infrastructure.
Mojawapo ama yale kidogo ambao kwa tumetaka pale mbeleni ni kwamba lazima wafanyabiashara hawa wadogo wanaweza kuajiri vijana wengi sana ama wanapeana ajira kwa wingi sana waweze kupatiwa mikopo kwa njia rahisi sana.
Hii policy ni muhimu kwa sababu policy zile mingi zimetengezwa hapo mbeleni hazijakuwa zikihusisha wanabiashara wadogo, na kwa sasa tumehakikisha kwamba yale maoni yote imeweza kuwakilishwa hapa, ndio kusonga mbele biashara za wafanyikazi wale wadogo itaweza kunawiri.
In Kisumu, the small-scale traders call for simplification and streamlining of the management of small-scale traders associations.
45% of the exports coming out of India are done by MSCs, and that is where, as a country, Kenya, we want to go that way, so that MSCs see the value of doing business.
We should operationalize the funding of these industries so that they can go borrow and pay back as they develop their industries.
Officials are, however, assuring small businesses that the MSE policy and the MSE Amendment Bill of 2025 will offer a better environment, including incentives for growth.
This sector is seeking to address those challenges that are facing MSMEs so that they are able to participate in economic development, especially job creation, contribution to GDP.
We have already come up with a document that captures the key issues that affect the operationalization and performance of the MSME, key issues that affect them, and it's become necessary that as required by the law that we subject these issues to public participation, and that's why we are here.
The policy is going to be implemented across the country, and as a county, we are going to domesticate whatever issues that have been raised by the policy.
The draft MSE policy of 2025 seeks to formalize micro, small and medium-sized enterprises, as well as harmonize support efforts by various agencies for sustainable growth. Alan Ooko, Prime Edition.
The youth should explore the immense opportunities online to enable them harness their skills for their economic well-being. This is according to Textbook Center CEO Sachin Verma, who wants the youth to leverage the existing support systems to monetize their skills.
Many talented youth continue struggling to make ends meet owing to limited formal unemployment opportunities. However, Book Center CEO Sachin Verma believes the job market has evolved with millions of jobs and income-generating opportunities now available online.
E-books is an interesting thing, quite a polarizing discussion. But what we have seen from global trends is, when e-books launched, there was fear that it's the death of print. But what we've seen recently, that's nowhere near happening.
He says entrepreneurship is one of the ways for the youth to monetize their skills.
One, passions turning into professionalism. So people have passions and they're now monetizing it. Previously what would have been considered unconventional are now mainstream careers, right? So like YouTube content creators, Jobs that didn't exist in the past 5 years are now mainstream.
Textbook Center, which was founded in 1964, has grown to a retail organization with 14 branches. The firm has diversified from a bookshop to providing a wide range of leisure and skill development books, stationery, and a range of technology items.
Textbook Center's legacy has always been that education should be affordable to everyone and it should reach throughout the country. I've had the pleasure to work with the founders, and their values were quite significant for education.
Varma says bookstores have over the years transformed to vibrant hubs where knowledge is accessed, created, and shared. Frederick Mwoki for Prime Edition.
Deepening Kenya and China ties. What does this mean for you? What are the opportunities for you? We have O'Brien Kimani on the other side of the studio who will be telling us more. O'Brien?
Well, thank you very much, Cynthia and Nyamai, back there in our studio B. And of course, we're here outside the KBC Gardens. And of course, our conversation will revolve around the ongoing visit by President William Ruto to China. And of course, we'll be helping you understand what exactly is happening in China. Well, from mega road and railway project to rising trade volumes, the relationship between Kenya and China has grown into strategic in Africa. When Kenya launched Vision 2030, the roadmap to economic transformation, it needed resource for partners to fund high-risk infrastructure. Enter China, willing, capable, and ready to finance projects, marking the beginning of a relationship rooted in infrastructure, trade, and diplomacy. Wairimo Jenga has more details.
Kenya established diplomatic ties with China in 1963, but it was in the 2000s that the bilateral ties deepened, driven by two key initiatives: the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation and China's Belt and Road Initiative. As Kenya turned its gaze towards East, under the late former President Mwai Kibaki, it marked a shift away from traditional Western allies, embracing new partnerships defined by infrastructure expansion and concessional loans as Kenya sought to move away from commercial loans, which are deemed too expensive. Today, projects like the Standard Gauge Railway, Nairobi Southern Bypass, Thika Superhighway, and the Nairobi Expressway have transformed transport and trade, connecting Mombasa to inland economic hubs. But these gains have come at a cost. As of March 2023, Kenya had borrowed $6 billion or 780.6 billion shillings from China, which is about 64% of Kenya's bilateral debt stock and 17% of total external public debt, according to data from the National Treasury. China is also one of Kenya's top trading partners, but the trade imbalance is in favor of the Asian country. President William Ruto's visit to China is seen as a chance to renegotiate trade, diversify exports, and push for greater market access for Kenyan products. This comes amid a shift in global dynamics. The trade between China and the United States is reshaping supply chains and geopolitics. Wairi Mujenga for Prime Edition.
Well, that is Wairi Mujenga, of course, giving us a breakdown of the relationship between Kenya and China. And of course, what is the way forward? I mean, President William Ruto is on his third trip to China. And of course, major deals have been signed, you know, from the financing of the Rironi Mau Summit to Malaba Highway, and of course to the expansion of the Standard Gauge Railway line. These are some of the issues that have been discussed, and of course we expect to see the financing of these issues being closed, or this project being closed anytime from now. And this is just about a tip of the iceberg. I have a team in studio who are going to help us understand the dynamics of all things, and of course What is innate for Kenya? I mean, today we have seen President William Ruto signing about 20 deals with his Chinese counterpart, President Xi Jinping. And so the question is, what is innate for China and what is innate for Kenya? To help me in this conversation, I am joined by Leonard Kafafa. He's a policy and geopolitical expert. He is on my extreme left. Thank you very much indeed, Kafafa, for joining us. And right in the middle, we have Ambassador Ngovi Kitao. He's a diplomat and governance expert. He's also joining us tonight in this conversation. Balozi, asante sana for your time.
Thank you very much.
Of course, on my immediate left, we have Liu Wanli. He's a deputy editor-in-chief at Xinhua News Agency, Africa Bureau. Thank you very much, Mr. Liu, for joining us.
Thank you.
I want to start with you, Mr. Liu. For the last 3 days, President William Ruto has been in China. What do you make of his trip to China? This is the third one.
Yeah, this is the third visit of President Ruto's to China. And President Ruto's visit to China is the first African leader to visit to China since the FOCAC, which was held last year in Beijing. And this is a very important moment for Kenya and China. And we know from the press release that China and Kenya has elevated their relationship to a strategic cooperative partnership. And that means in the future, the countries will deepen their cooperation and they will explore more economic opportunities for both of the people in the two countries. And also, as our media houses, we will have the opportunities to expand our cooperation with media organizations such as KBC. Yeah, that's very important for us.
I want to hear from you. I mean, you know, Kenya and China, they have had diplomatic relations since 1964, 1 year after Kenya became an independent country. And so we have seen the relationship between the two countries grow to become one of the most important in Africa. Now with the elevation of their partnership, what is it going to change, and how significant is this new partnership?
I think China and Kenya established their diplomatic relations in 1963. But before President Ruto's visit to China, we have an interview with the president. And in that interview, the president said that China and Kenya had established their relationships since 600 years ago. Yeah, we have business convoys, businessmen visiting Kenya, and Kenya has businessmen that's sending their goods to China at that time. So I think during the past several hundreds of years, the people in the two countries have established a mutual trust that is so deep that we can trust each other in the future. Yeah, for example, the Chinese government and the Chinese enterprises, they have made huge investment in Kenya that built massive infrastructure and promoting people-to-people exchanges. For example, we established 4 Confucius Institutes in Kenya. That is has great significance, to advance the people-to-people understanding, between the two countries.
Mr. Liu is talking about, the relationship between Kenya and China, and it goes back, several thousand of years. I mean, it goes back all the way to the Qing dynasty, when Chinese traders used to come to the port of to Lamu, to the island of Lamu, where they used to do trade. But I want to hear this from you, Leonard. I mean, when you look at in the last 12 years, Kenyan presidents have made about 8 trips to China. Their president, Xi Jinping, is yet to visit Kenya. Why is this the case?
My view is that it's been a gradual deepening of the relationship between both countries, between China and Kenya. Initially, of course, Kenya had an unaligned policy historically. When there was that division between the West and the East, Kenya took on an non-aligned position. But with time, it became apparent that Kenya tended to lean towards the West rather than the East. I'm going to give a historical perspective. I mean, fairly modern history. Then, during the tenure of the late President Kibaki, we began to look east with projects like the Thika Superhighway being partly funded by Chinese money. The relationship deepened further during the tenure of former President Uhuru Kenyatta, where we had the SGR, big ticket infrastructure development project. Then we had the expressway. Now it looks like we are taking it a notch higher, given that President Ruto is the first president after the summit last year, after the African summit last year.
Yeah.
As our colleague has rightly pointed out, he's the first president to visit China. He's the first president to visit China following that summit at the invitation of the Chinese premier. And what we also note is that this is, unlike an official visit, this is a state visit. And again, it is a 5-day visit. 5-day visit places a lot of prominence on the nature of that particular visit. It's not like others that are usually truncated, say, to 2 or 3 days. This is a 5-day visit. So there's a lot of significance in that. So my take is that with this deepening relationship over the years, it is quite likely then that we will see the Chinese president visiting pretty soon. Yeah.
I want to hear this from you, Ambassador Kitao. I mean, you used to be the Kenyan ambassador to South Korea from 2009 to 2014. That was about 5 years. And so you come on this platform, with tremendous experience and, of course, a deep understanding of issues in that part of the world. We do not have any other African country that have signed this kind of a partnership with China. Kenya is the first one. Why is Kenya so important to China?
Yeah, thank you very much, Kimani. Let me start from where my colleagues have stopped by saying that the relationship is very historical, it's very deep, going back to the 14th century. And China has been a friend of Kenya and of Africa. Despite that they were here that early and earlier than the Europeans, they never saw the need to colonize Kenyans or to colonize Africans. Something very, very positive, and we are very grateful about that. Then secondly, we need to take note that China started teaching Swahili way back in the 50s, meaning that they were prepared to work with us, to be part of the same community, which is now the current phrase we are using. But as early as 1956, Chinese universities were teaching Swahili. Then in the case of my friend here, he told me, Mr. Liu, that they opened an office in Kenya before we became independent. That's very telling. So, why Kenya then? One, is that relationship. Then the other point he raised was that we've had 5 presidents. And if you look at the relation between China and Kenya during the time of Jomo Kenyatta, it was a very cautious relationship. And we did encounter some difficulties when in 1967 we closed the Chinese embassy in Kenya due to some political misunderstandings.
Yes.
And it was opened again in 1978. Then after that, we had President Moi, who still continued to align with the West, the way Kenyatta was doing. See, Kenyatta had 2 issues. One was an ideological difference and an economic difference. So when Moi came on board, it continued with aligning with the West until the USSR, the Soviet, collapsed in 1991. And then the West tried to put a lot of pressure on Kenya. You remember there were ambassadors here even telling our presidents what to do from the West.
Yeah.
And that is the time now we started looking at China because of its non-interference policy, which was very positive for Kenya. But the real takeoff came with Kibaki. As he said, President Kibaki came with the Look East policy. And he realized that we are not going very far with the West, and that's when he dispatched a lot of us, including myself, to go east to find out why our relationships of 1960s not matured, and what do we need to do to make them mature. And that's how we got into China, to Korea, into Japan. Then, when Kibaki did that, President Uhuru came on board. And I think he really went full blast. And that is the time when we signed the Comprehensive Strategic Partnership Agreement in 2017. That's when he signed the first framework. And then President Ruto came on board, and he has tried to push that further. But what I hear from Xi Jinping is that the enhanced relationship needs to go further than look east, to something like look global south, act global south, so that we are a bigger community. So that is how this has transformed.
I want to hear this from Mr. Liu. When you look at the trade between Kenya and China, I mean, it is heavily skewed towards Beijing. You know, last year we saw trade between the two countries jumping all the way to about 520 billion Kenya shillings. But almost 500 billion shillings was China selling its goods to Kenya. From a Beijing perspective, what strategies can we put in place to ensure that the trade balance is even?
Yeah, I think the trade balance is quite important for both important for China and Kenya, and the leaders of the two countries have agreed to deal with it. For example, in the press release after the two presidents, the China promised to invest in the industrial parks, to encourage the imports from Kenya. For example, I know the Kenya coffee is quite popular in China, and the avocados and other agricultural products are quite popular in China. And the Chinese government has taken a series of measures to encourage the imports from Kenya. For example, we have China-Africa Economic and Trade Expo, which will be held in Hunan province in June. And this is an expo that at the national level in China, which means that one of the most important expos in China. And that expo, a lot of companies from Kenya will go to China to display their products. And we have a series of measures, for example, tax-free measures, and also the to facilitate the import procedures at the custom. So the Chinese government views this is an important issue and agrees to deal with it by enhancing the investment here and also encourage imports from Kenya.
Very good. Yeah. I mean, we want to take a short break, and of course, when we come back, I just want to hear from you. What a lot of people are not realizing is that the Azerbaijan president, Ilham Aliyev, is in China, you know, at the same time with the Kenyan president. But when you look at the global headlines of major publications, they are not talking about the trip by Azerbaijani's president. A lot of them are talking about Kenya and China, you know, and the new trade pact that was signed today. So I'll be coming back to try and find out why is this happening, but that is after the break. I mean, you're watching us, we're coming to you live from our KBC gardens, and of course we're having a great conversation here and trying to analyze the happenings in Beijing, where President William Ruto is on a 4-day visit. And of course, we are back with more stories. Stay right here. Welcome back. You're watching Prime Edition with me, O'Brien Kimani. Our conversation this evening is around the ongoing trip to China by President William Ruto. And of course, we're trying to break down what it exactly means for us and China. Well, Kenya is targeting to secure funding for the extension of standard gauge railway from Naivasha to Malaba border through Narok, Bomet, Kericho, Nyamira and Kisumu counties. The project is expected to open up Western Kenya for investment, enhance passenger as well as cargo transport, as we report now.
Chinese firms have been involved in key infrastructure projects like the Standard Gauge Railway, Nairobi Expressway, and some buildings. Construction of the Mombasa-Naivasha Standard Gauge Railway was completed in October 2019. Over the past 5 years, the passenger service on the Standard Gauge Railway christened Madaraka Express has moved more than 10 million people between Nairobi and Mombasa. In addition, cargo volumes on the Standard Gauge Railway have risen to 6.4 million metric tons for the year ended June 2024. However, despite the availability of the Nairobi-Naivasha Standard Gauge Railway, the Kenya Association of Manufacturers says some businesses prefer tracking their cargo due to cost and flexibility.
Naomba uongozi ya Kenya na uongozi ya Uganda wakutane watengeleze hii kitu.
President William Ruto has pledged to secure funding for extension of the SGR from Naivasha to Malaba to reduce the cost of transport and to streamline logistics.
We've had conversations with the President of Uganda, with the President of DRC, with the President of Congo, Brazzaville, and we've all agreed on the need to extend this piece of infrastructure as a means of facilitating trade across our continent and making sure that companies like yourselves who set up in Kenya not only have access to the Kenyan market, but have also access to the East African market and the continental market.
Extension of the SGR to Malaba is seen as crucial for enabling traders transport cargo seamlessly by rail from the port of Mombasa to the Kenyan border, then to landlocked countries including Uganda, Rwanda, the Democratic Republic of Congo, South Sudan, and Burundi. Ndutamo Kami for Prime Edition.
Well, and of course, one of the deals that has been signed in Beijing is the extension of Phase 2 and Phase 3 of the SGR from Naivasha to the border town of Malaba. And of course, we'll be watching to see when that is expected to start. I just want to hear this from you, Leonard. Before we went for the break, I was talking about the fact that two presidents are already in China, President William Ruto of Kenya and President Ilham Aliyev of Azerbaijan. But many people are not talking about the Azerbaijan trip. They're talking about Kenya. Why is this so?
I think the operative word here is strategic, and I've heard it mentioned several times this evening. Mm-hmm. Kenya is strategic because it is the entry point into Eastern Africa, and by extension to the very heart of Africa itself. I mean, when you look at Kenya, when you look at the SGR, for instance, the way it is envisaged to operate when it is complete, the SGR is going to move through Kenya all the way to Uganda, to Rwanda, and to the DRC. And of course, Burundi as well, South Sudan, covering South Sudan. So that whole area forms what you call the Northern Corridor. And the Northern Corridor is strategic for any investor from outside the continent who either wants to sell or access the markets that these corridors expose, or access the raw materials that can be transported through this corridor out of the continent. So it's strategic, it's very strategic. Mm-hmm. Opening up the Northern Corridor opens up quite a bit of Africa, and you know Africa is resource rich. Africa is, has, I think, 60% of the world's arable land. It has more than 50% of the world's water resources, natural water resources. It has rare earth minerals that are untapped. So all these things make Africa very attractive, and the way to access this is through Kenya. So that's what, when you compare our president's visit and say the president of Azerbaijan's visit, the importance of the other president's visit pales in comparison when you compare with ours. It's strategic.
Yeah. And of course, as we move on, we'll be understanding how strategic this relationship is going to be. I want to come to you, Balozi. I mean, when you look at China relationship with Kenya, in terms of debt, I mean, 63% of bilateral debt that Kenya owes to the rest of the world is held by Chinese. When you look at our national debt, you're talking about 691 billion shillings, which is owed to China. With this new project, are we likely to see, our debt to China going through the roof? And if yes, how then do we ensure that we don't tip the scale of the balance?
Yeah, thank you very much. Let me pick up from what you said, and especially the strategic position of Kenya. If you compare like Kenya and Azerbaijan, we are already, our trade balance between Kenya and China is almost $10 billion now. And China is exporting to Kenya about 9 billion, while Azerbaijan is about 3 billion. Mm-hmm. And in Azerbaijan, it's really locked. There's nowhere to go. It's either you go to Armenia or to Georgia and then the Caspian Sea. The other side is blocked by Turkey. But when it comes to Kenya, the world is open. So the debt we are taking is not actually for Kenya, because it's for infrastructure, opening the route to East and Central Africa. We have competition. He talked about the Northern Corridor with the Central Corridor. The Central Corridor is Dar es Salaam. And they have put a lot of effort because they are doing a railway line, an SGR to Mwanza and an SGR to Kigoma to approach Central Africa, but it's a very long route. So the debt will go up, but it is visible. We are able to pay because we are going to generate more income.
And the question has always been, I mean, you see, when you look at the debt that is owed to China, I mean, it's 95% of it goes to infrastructural projects.
Yes.
And so the question has always been, then, as a country, how do we use this expanded infrastructure for trade and for commerce so that we can develop our balance sheet as a country?
Yeah, I think the question you're asking is that how do we improve the quality and the efficiency of the Kenya-China relations so that we are not borrowing too much money which we cannot pay. And I think you are coming from the background where people are saying there is a debt trap. That is all propaganda. That is not true, because we have economies just the way China has, just the way Europeans have, and our economies are at par with the others. So we are not being told by anybody, we are not being forced to borrow. But this borrowing for infrastructure is very, very important, because without that, how do we trade? How do we reach the rest of Africa under what we are calling now African Continental of Free Trade Area? If we don't have this infrastructure, we will not be able to reach them. Now, how much debt should we take? That depends on, we need to assess, like the Rironi-Mau Summit you have talked about. Once that road is completed, what impact does it have on our GDP? And that should guide us as to how much we need to borrow and how much money we need to put in a particular project. If I was to go a little bit further, and based on what has been signed today, the 20 agreements, the 20 MOUs, and that's why I really agree with the two presidents that we've reached a point where we need to look at integrating the systems and the processes. Instead of looking at the Rironi Road or the SGR to the border, we need to look at the value addition by those infrastructures. What we need to do, like right now, say we are fighting so many things, climate change, green energy, and all this. We need to look at a situation whereby we are going to borrow $1 billion based on what has been reported. And remember that China increased the money available to Africa to 50.7 billion, meaning that out of the 54 countries, the most we'll get is 1 billion, which I think has been signed today. So how best do we utilize that money? So we need to have a synergy whereby a lot of things are related. Like, let's take the case of, I saw that there's a collaboration between the railways. So we need to not just go to the railway, but go to the automotive industry together, where we can have a special economic zone. Let me give an example to explain the concept.
Yeah.
Today, in Africa, South Africa is assembling more vehicles than anybody else, about 650,000. And that blocks South Africa. Morocco is doing about 550,000. Kenya is doing 14,000. That's an area where now China can come on board on electric vehicles. So what we need to do is, say for example, we go to Naivasha, we pick 300 acres. It's not expensive. Okay, China, it's state land. Us, it's money. We buy 300 acres at $50 million. 100 million put infrastructure, okay? Then now we can get the Chinese to bring in technology and to bring in their investment. Like the biggest vehicle manufacturer in China is BYD. It has overtaken Tesla last year. So we get BYD to do an assembly plant. With BYD will be about...
They are moving to Ethiopia. They are setting up a base in Ethiopia.
No, we can do better than that. It's about 300 million. Why we can do better than that is that we have lithium for the batteries in Kajiado. Put another 250 billion. Yeah. So with about 1 billion, we are able to start industrialization in Kenya. We have vehicles. In that 300 acre, we have the BYD, and we have like 200 SMEs.
In that place?
In that place.
And they can occupy the Naivasha SEs?
Yes,
SEZ.
And then they will supply wire harnesses, glass, shock absorbers, radiators. We don't have to import all these kind of things. So with that synergistic approach, then the debt is viable.
What you're simply saying is that China has the wherewithal to turn Kenya into an African manufacturing as well as an industrial giant.
Yes.
I want to hear this from you. I know you also want to react to what Balozi was saying, but even before you react, I also want to hear this from you. Africa, with about 54 countries, Kenya has been picked by China as the first country to visit after the FOCAC meeting. Why Kenya?
Yeah, I think because Kenya is the most important trading partner in Africa, China's most important trading partner in Africa. And when we're talking about Kenya's significance, I agree with our colleague that we focus on the keyword strategic. Yeah, that's why more and more Chinese investment are coming to Kenya. So in terms of the investment and that, I want to also contribute to Mr. Ambassador's view that if we talk about the Kenya's total debt, the debt owing to China is only about more than 10%, about 70% of Kenya's total debt. That is not a higher number, because most of the debt are owing to the international lenders, for example, like World Bank. China about 200 countries within the initiative mechanism, but this one is the flagship project. And with the SGR, we saw the containers shipping from the Mombasa port, and also we see satellite cities outside Nairobi. And also we see the Chinese investment resulted in the Lamu port, Mombasa oil terminals. That means the two countries are building Kenya a regional logistic hub. So with this hub, the Chinese investment and Chinese goods are going to many African countries through Kenya. And this is a huge benefit for Kenyan people.
Very well.
And another point is because the lack of infrastructure is common in Africa. Because, for example, some inland countries cannot have industrial parks because it's quite expensive to import the material from the port to their inland industrial areas. But with SGR and with the expansion project, we can link, for example, Uganda, Rwanda,
Burundi,
Burundi, and other African countries. That means Kenya is the door for Africa.
It's a gateway.
Yeah, it's a gateway. So through this gateway, we can bring the world into Africa. And so that make Kenya very strategic, important.
And I think, when you look at the Vision 2030, that's why the architects of that critical document, are talking about improving access and, of course, the efficiency of the port of Mombasa to ensure that it remains, as a strategic port to the eastern seaboard of Africa. Balozi talked about, some of the initiatives that Kenya can put in place, Kenya and China can put in place, to turn Kenya into an industrial base. China controls more than 95% of rare earth minerals in the world. It's the largest producer of these critical minerals that goes into powering our phones, laptops, electric cars, and so much. I remember in 2014, it was reported that Kenya has trillions worth of rare earth minerals in Shimba Hills. He talked about lithium in Kajiado. We have coal in Mui Basin, in Mwingi County. How then do we partner with China to ensure that we acquire the expertise that is needed to exploit these resources for our own socio-economic development? Leonard Kafafa.
That's a good question. I think we need to basically borrow from what China has done. Unlike other Western countries that have taken 200 years to industrialize, China has leapfrogged a lot of these countries over the last 20 to 30 years. At the moment, statistically, China, the middle class in of the that the relatively what they how them we have a lot world. The most common
in short,
China for us.